with the special envoy on anti-Semitism, Deborah Lipstadt. And now she's at the Israeli embassy for Yom Ha'atzmaut, the Israeli Independence Day celebration. So she's making the rounds.
Yeah.
What?
Do you have a
That
list
was
of
all.
all
Oh, it's just on
copies
just
of
now.
your phone?
Yes,
Seven
so go click on that.
I had a friend
Because I
who
can't
was
find
you
the
there.
block
on
copies.
Jewish,
You have
on
the
the
names
literal
I'll do
Independence Day,
of
but
the
that was a
streets.
date. But I guess on your calendar,
Now
it could
what
be a
it's
day.
about.
Well, if it is the lunar, I don't know if
Yeah,
that's how they
right,
do it.
right.
Okay.
So if they're doing it
Hey Maxie, I'm
Friday.
just sorting my meeting.
Yeah.
You hit your toe? Okay.
Oh, no.
You can put ice on it, okay, sweetie? It's not gonna swell. Your toe's gonna be fine.
An elevator.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Elevator is good.
Hit my toe against the wall.
Ooh.
Oh, no.
It's like-
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right.
Who's there? Who's watching the kids?
My 12-year-old, almost 12-year-old. He's watching the 8-year-old. In Maryland, 8-year-olds are allowed to stay home alone.
That's right.
Yeah.
If they're mature enough. So,
Who determines maturity?
the parent when the parent has to leave without help, he determines,
They
or she
determine in a
determines.
hurry, this kid is really
Right
mature.
now, he's matured incredibly. And when the parent's half a block
I
away.
thought you had a nanny there.
We used to have an au pair, and now we have a babysitter in the afternoon. No one living in my house anymore, except for family.
Okay, it is 7:30,
7:30.
so you know.
Yeah.
Hello, Lauren.
Want to give it another minute, or
How many people are watching?
we've got
So
a
we have
grand total
9.
of 9 people, including the office, myself, and the husband of a council member.
It is a true Hollywood Squares right now.
Yeah.
So it's 6.
We've dug in the middle.
And Ron, so we're
Yeah.
at 5 constituents.
Yeah. Well, and Doug, so it's actually.
Oh, right, so we're at 4 constituents online
They
and
have to
3
be.
in the office.
Yeah.
Good.
So it's record setting.
All right, I'm going to
Okay, so we'll get
ask
started.
Ron to unmute for 1 second. Hey, Ron, can you do?
Yes.
So just say, hey, 1, 2, 3.
Hey, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, perfect. I didn't get a chance to test before, so I want to make sure we could hear. So we're good.
You follow directions really
Yeah.
well. 2 years of law school.
Yeah, I'm letting you in right now.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, we'll get started at 7:31 p.m. on May 12th, calling this meeting to order. And we'll start, as always, with Keith, Mayor and Weatherman.
Cat whisperer.
Thank you, Andrew.
Oh.
Okay, we've had a few showers around this evening. That'll be in the forecast overnight, tomorrow night, Saturday, and Sunday. Although, don't think that we're gonna have any kind of a washout really, because they're just gonna be scattered showers, and from time to time you'll see them and get them. Sunday, it looks like temperatures will go up into the mid-80s. You're even gonna notice the humidity on Sunday. And showers and thunderstorms, some of those could be heavy, probably will not get here until late afternoon or evening. And then later on next week, we're gonna have some very pleasant, low humidity, very beautiful weather, just like we had a few days ago. Bright, brilliant sunshine. Springtime is at its very best.
Yep.
So right now, that concludes the weather forecast.
Good,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to Doug for the building administrator's report, please.
Yep, I just asked Doug to unmute, so should be just a second here. All right. Go ahead, Doug.
Good evening. At 7220 Dellfield, the applicant had applied for a permit to remove the existing house and build a new house. That project has been completed. The village is closing out the building permit and refunding the applicant's performance bond. And the new owners said they will be moving in either this week or next. At 120 Quincy Street, the applicant applied for a permit to add some additions to the rear of the existing house. The village issued their building permit on February 6th, and the exterior work has begun on that project. The 162 Quincy, we first thought they were going to make some additions to the outside of the house, but we've talked to the contractor, and apparently all of the improvements are going to be interior work with no exterior work, and the house has been sold to a new owner, so we'll monitor that. They will need a performance bond to protect the right-of-way and protect the village streets. At 7200 Summit Avenue, the council granted a variance for some addition to the existing house. The county issued their building permit on April 12th, and the village issued their building permit on April 26th, but the work has not begun yet, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Doug. Before we go to residents' comments, just a point of personal, well, let me say this. I just wanted to recognize quickly the hard and tireless work of the election committee that immediately deployed after that non-prepaid postage curveball. As the liaison and seeing all the email traffic, I was really just so impressed and proud of the hard work. So a big thank you to George, Naomi, Leah, Eric, and Paul. So thank you very, very much. So that was my point of personal privilege, was what I was going to say. But now we'll open up for anyone who'd like to speak on any given issue here at the village office and online.
Is this time
Yeah,
for
Yes,
our
so
question?
recognizing John.
Okay, I'm John Sherrow on Chestnut Street. I guess my questions will probably be directed at Arthur tonight,
Oh.
okay?
Okay.
I read intent with the information that was given out on the website today regarding the budget, et cetera. And I am a little confused about several items that you mentioned about taxation and things like that. First of all, I pulled my county tax bill, and you're right. The Martin's Addition tax rate does show up as a one item on it. That's great, I have no problem about that. And certainly the tax that's assessed for the utility companies and so forth, that seems to be reasonable. But I am a little concerned about this personal property tax, which gives me some thought about what the hell is it for, and how is it collected, and what benefit is it, and I would like for Arthur to really go into details about what it is and where.
Right, it's almost nothing. It applies to, if you have a business in your house and you have inventory and stockpiles and that sort of thing, that would apply. But since we have virtually none of that, it's a tax that we used to at one. I'm not even sure whether we're collecting it from anybody now. It used to be one or two
Very, very
households.
Very, very little.
Very little.
Yeah.
There used to be one or two households that had it levied on them, but it's for most people it's not an issue at all.
Right. Well, you do show a line item on the property, on your revenue and so forth, of $4,500. Is that? Let me pull that out.
Yeah.
Yep,
It is.
it's page 17 of the packet.
Yeah. Okay. You do show a line item of collected.
Personal property, 4,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The point of it is that where's it? Who's it coming from, and how is it collected?
Well, we don't know, because we don't know. We're not allowed to know individual collection by individual property. So the county does that, and like the income tax, we don't know who's paying the income tax. It comes in through the county or through the state, and we don't know who's doing it.
Well,
So do we know if those revenues were?
I can tell you that if you look, you'll see J&S Electric on it.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I was saying, if you run a business from your house,
Right. Well,
then
at least my business.
then it will appear.
Right. But so obviously is it a business? It's not residential, personal property? I mean,
No,
what
the
town
personal
record-
property is your normal property tax, the assessed value of the property.
Then, okay, then why is the village showing 50 cents per $100 of assessed value for personal property? Is that residential,
That's
personal?
well, we have different rates, several different rates. One for the assessed value of the property, one for the, for this other one, and then there's a third one. Is there a
Yeah.
third?
Well, there's the income tax, the property tax, which is the tax on your house.
The
and
tax
then
on your
personal
house.
I understand
property.
that, yeah, as I
And
said,
then
I
the
see that
personal
as
property
a
is.
line item.
Yeah, the personal property is that business-related tax, so you have inventory and that kind of
So I
thing.
guess the question is,
Yeah.
how long has that existed? And this is,
That's
this
been
is
there
a,
forever.
this is
Yeah.
a, this is
I
a village
disagree. I looked at the
decision.
charter and it was on the charter.
Yeah.
charter.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, it
Okay.
goes, yeah, here.
And do we know if we actually, if that revenue, that projected revenue actually does,
Yeah, it
Does
comes
come
in,
in?
yes, it does
Yeah,
come
we
in.
did some,
Yeah.
I
Uh,
can pull
but
up what the actual.
I have,
was.
to tell you the truth, I don't pay a lot of attention to it because you pay it, and as I said, one or two other, residents pay it. And it's a relatively small part, like, well under 1% of our total revenue, so it's not something we pay a lot of attention
Yeah,
to.
I sort of got in my mind that,
Yeah.
are you looking to start taxing the residents? You know, seriously,
Are we what?
looking to tax?
seriously
the
looking to
residents?
tax the residents in Martin's Edition for personal property such as computer, cars, or
No,
furniture?
it's, as I say, it's for business, business capital, business,
Well, it certainly doesn't talk to me in those terms that it's business. It looks like could be more
Yeah,
residential.
it's a
Well,
confusing term.
Yeah.
Under state law, under state tax law, personal property means property owned by a business. So it is a very confusing term, but that's a state term. For businesses that operate in the state, there's a law requiring those businesses to file an annual return providing the valuation of the tangible property owned by the business. And based on that value that's reported on an annual basis, businesses have to pay taxes on that property. And the village is empowered to receive a portion of that tax as well. But
So is this
again, it's only for
I
property
understand that.
owned in the name of a business.
I understand that, Mr. Bolt, but when my wife looked at this and she says, holy mackerel, John, we got a new tax coming.
Sure, yeah, I can understand that because personal property means something completely different in plain English.
And that's what I'm here to try to,
It's-
quite honestly, to understand it. And is this just boilerplate stuff, Arthur? Or, I mean, is there some way that we could legitimize the tax by either saying business or
Well, if it's a
homeowner,
state, if it's
residential, or
state
whatever?
terminology, I
Yeah.
don't think we can change the
Yeah.
term, but
Right.
it's helpful that Ron explained
Yeah.
that that term is confusing and that it is related to business, business property, I would say.
business property, right.
And, John, just to go back to your question, so far, the total that the village has received of that tax is $893.83.
Okay, well, you show a line item as 4,500.
Right,
Well,
and that's
we-
just the,
we don't know how much we're gonna come in with
Oh,
every year, so
right.
essentially we put in
Yeah.
whatever was in.
So, and just to
10
be
years
clear,
ago.
this
Sure.
is and Ron, please, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a state tax, and this line item just shows what we receive from the state based on the tax. It's not something the village is imposing, and again, it's a confusing term, as Ron just explained, and it's been around, as long as this village has been
Yeah,
incorporated.
I have to,
Yeah,
because
that's-
I went back and looked at the
that's
village
right,
charter, yeah.
The village could zero it out if it wanted to. The village has the ability to set the tax rate that it's going to collect. So the village could, for example, set it to 0 if you had no interest in receiving a tax on the.
But that doesn't
business.
change the tax that's assessed to the individual residents who have businesses in the village, correct? It's just that we don't get a piece of that revenue. Or could we tell the state, we do
That's-
not
Yeah,
want you?
we could say 0.
we could tell the state, don't tax our residents on
No,
the
no,
business?
no. Residents would still have to pay their state and county taxes, but the village could exempt businesses from the village level tax.
Okay,
So,
all right,
the village receives a share of residents' income tax
That's different.
based on state law.
That's different.
But then the village has the option to impose an additional tax for real property, utility property, and business property, if that makes sense.
yep,
Right.
okay,
Well, Chevy Chase Village has the same tax, as same wording, almost boilerplate, et cetera, because I checked that out, see what was,
yeah.
see if other municipalities were doing it as well. I like his word, I like his comment about, if you're not gonna do it, zero it out, and, not throw out a tax that caused my wife to come to me and say, what the hell is going on, John? We getting another tax? But anyway,
Well, it's probably been there.
my opinion.
It's been there in the past too. You probably just noticed it
Yeah.
when you looked at it in detail.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Art, I think you gave me a pretty good explanation. I'd like for you to go on record saying that hopefully you'll zero this out.
Well, we will consider in the future.
Okay, all right, maybe some other comments from the residents, I don't know, but,
Okay.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you,
Thank you
John.
very
you.
much for your comments,
Okay.
gentlemen.
Other residents before we move on? Okay, seeing none, let's move to committee updates. Marty, sorry, your hand went up a little late, but we'll entertain your question or comment.
Thank you. I was a little slow finding my raised hand button. And I want to echo something you said, which is a thank you to the election committee for their very careful work, and to Niles especially for his careful work to figure out how to handle that problem with the non-postage paid return envelopes. And again, I appreciate the willingness to answer the residents' questions, of which there were many, about that whole process and what the remedies would be at the meeting on May 9th. That was a very helpful and productive meeting, and I really appreciate the openness and the willingness to explain, the specifics, because people really didn't understand whether ballots were going to be lost in a, postage payment due bin somewhere in Cincinnati on their way to New Jersey. So anyway, I want to thank the committee and Niles especially for digging down. My understanding, just to clarify for those who weren't at the meeting, is that the post office is essentially delivering the return envelopes that had no postage on them, and that Eclectic, the contractor, will be able to use the little QR box codes on the ballot return envelopes to track down and hopefully retrieve any missing ballots. And Andrew, I just want to clarify a question that you answered at that committee meeting on the 9th, which was that if we do have ballots still in transit, or missing ballots on May 23rd, when the committee begins to, or has scheduled the vote counting, that the council would be willing to consider postponing the vote counting to make sure that every vote does get counted. So Andrew, was that correct? Did I remember that correctly?
I think the issue came up, and I said that's something that could be discussed and considered because of the heightened concern given the envelopes without the prepaid postage. So.
Okay, thank you for confirming that, because I think that might, who knows if we'll need it or not, but if we do, I'm glad that you're on it in advance, and I hope that other council members would also be willing to. Obviously, counting every vote matters, so thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marty. I don't know logistically how that would work, given that we don't have another council meeting before then. I trust from past experience that ballot envelopes have arrived on time. We have a way of tracking it now, and so perhaps we will track it and take it from there. If there are ballots that are en route that somehow have been delayed because there was no postage, I think the election committee can also gather and make a decision. I don't know if there are any
But I
comments on
think that would assume that the ballots had actually been mailed within the time
Right.
frame that the committee said would be the usual
Right.
receipt period.
Right.
So that no one mails them on the 22nd.
Right.
And expects to
Right.
delay things. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And the only thing I'll add, Andrew, and thanks, and I'm actually anticipating the election committee. I see George, will give their report and things, but I did have a few residents sort of say that they were going to reach out to the election committee to notify, and Niles notifying them that they mailed their ballot, and they may request the idea if they could get a receipt. You know? So I think you may have individual residents reach out and say, well, if you can confirm it, let me know. But
Yeah, we've had residents reach out and already and say, hey, I mailed it in, and just say, hey, did they get it?
Got it.
In those circumstances, everyone we've said, yes, they've received
Yeah.
it so far, so.
And the great news is we have confirmation that, I think it's less than a dozen, maybe 9 or 10 ballots without postage have actually arrived. So the US Postal Service is true to its word, and so far so good. And let me just say, and Marty did a great thing here, I thank Niles every day for what he does. So when I talked about the election committee and its hard work, I thank Niles every single day, and I praise, a higher being here, that he is here and helping us on a daily basis. He's really done a marvelous job. So thank you, Niles.
So a round of applause.
Okay, all right. We're moving on to committee updates. I think we're gonna let the election committee go last and have the other committees. If Keith, if you have something you wanna start with, in no particular order, and then Lori.
Sure.
You wanna go first, Lori?
You already went.
Okay, so we'll go with community engagement update.
Yeah, hang on 1 second here.
Take
Go,
a
you
few
start.
minutes. I'm gonna, good evening, everyone. Keith Allen with the Community Engagement Committee. At the last meeting, and I'd like to thank everybody for stepping up and being a street captain, for the support we get from the Community Engagement Committee and the Village Council. What we discussed and set in place were the street captains. This is a volunteer role where each of us are doing the best they can. If we can't do something because of other constraints, no problem, we can ask for help. The street captain role is primarily about helping the village staff and council, the Community Engagement Committee and residents with communications, helping new residents and helping connect existing residents to the best of our ability and capacity. The street captain is not about public safety, EMR, or neighborhood watch. The basics of the street captains is to help distribute the welcome bag to new residents, and Niles, he makes that up here in the office. Distribute flyers for events, help the village identify new residents, alert the office if there is a for sale sign or movers, etc. What I asked was for a couple of our residents to come up this evening, and they, for some reason, they couldn't make it, but this is what I'd like to do at the monthly meetings, as anybody moves into the community, to officially present them to the council and to the residents here at the meeting. We want to try to be a connector. For instance, does someone have a lawnmower to lend, to try to make introductions, try to make an effort to get to know the neighbors on the street. And then the welcome bag. We had a great discussion about the welcome bag and all the component parts, including a gift voucher to La Ferme and a map highlighting your new house, as well as lots of other goodies These are available for new residents from the office. And actions, keep an eye out for new residents. There may be residents who have moved in the last 6 months or longer who may not have received a welcome bag. Please feel free to reach out to them and check. If necessary, we will have further meetings. All street captains are also invited to come to the Community Engagement Committee meetings, because this is where we plan the parties, and community engagement, it stands for fun. This is the fun committee. Try to connect and introduce yourself to other residents, and for instance, for your information, the 2022 resident directory will be available in August.
Ooh, good.
And I think that's it, everyone. Please let me know if I missed anything. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you soon. I hope that all of you that are virtually tuned in will come up here to the village office so that I can see your smiling faces and welcome you here, because that's what we want more of, more engagement. And Niles, if you have that list of
Yeah.
block captains, if you could just read those off for me. And I thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention.
Certainly. So
Thank you, Keith.
this is all on the website, so you can look it up. But we have like Tess Harbor on Bradley, Paul McGowan on Brookville, Justin is Marty Langan, Cummings is Denise and Peter Glassman. The 7200 block of Delfield is Rick Hellings. The dead end of Delfield is Lauren Beal. Belleville is Oliver Wolf. Oxford and Quincy are, of course, Linwelly. Raymond is Lisa Single. Shepherd is Sally Van Tassel. Summit is Lauren Bramlett. Taylor is Steve Howard. And Thornapple is Barbara Sack-Singer. And Turner is Elizabeth Boland. So, all right. Yeah. So, do we want to do?
Let's go with ethics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Geez, you're a hard act to follow. Katie, did you have a chance to send around the SOP and the updated conflict of interest form?
She'd send it to you. It's okay. I have it here if you want to share.
Oh,
it.
you do? Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yeah, maybe if you want to share the screen?
Yeah, I can share the screen. Hang on 1 second.
Okay, so
It's not in the packet. It's but I'll share it on screen. But I'll send it around to everyone later. Yes.
Binoculars.
You know what I can do too? I sent it to Niles in case we needed it on the screen.
Yeah.
So I could maybe just forward it to all of you.
Yeah. Hang on 1 second.
That works. So then you can either look at the
Okay,
screen
and
or
then
you can look
we
at your
will
email. Yeah.
Make it really, 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 really big. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Like I'm at the
Feel like I'm taking a
ophthalmologist's
doctor's
office.
test.
Yeah.
Hello.
Here,
You've highlighted it now.
Okay,
Let's
so
see.
let me just put in your names here. It'll take 1 second. That's Andrew.
And you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, we got
Oh,
a.
Arthur, I missed, sorry.
It's okay.
I had 4 and, okay, so I just sent it to your emails too, so if you want to look at your emails. All right, so I'm going to read the report, but I also want to give the council an opportunity to ask questions if they have questions about both. We developed an SOP for the review process. We met for our 5th meeting a couple weeks back, and we did a review of all the forms that Niles has collected, and this one time we also looked at the candidate forms that the election committee had collected, and this is in alliance with what the code says, is that the ethics committee is supposed to receive these forms. But there wasn't, I think the forms were approved in November of 2019, but then the pandemic struck, so I don't think that there was a review process before. So this is the first time that we did it. We found a lot of glitches. Niles helped us identify the glitches, but we've come up with SOP going forward to leave to the future committee that is consistent with the timeline that's in the code, and that also coordinates closely with both the village manager and with the council. We didn't coordinate with the council this time. Niles just helped us resolve the issues. We were kind of late to the game anyway, because a lot of these forms are due in August, and we just kind of looked at this as a trial run. But going forward, we figured that since the volunteers in effect report to the council, that the council would be involved if there is an issue with someone not completing a form, or also if there's a reported conflict. A reported conflict wouldn't disqualify anyone from service, but just for informational purposes, since we are collecting that information, we pass it on, probably, depending on the circumstance, to the council liaison for that committee. So that's the SOP.
Yep.
We're just
And then-
gonna move on down now. Now, we revised the conflict of interest form. There were a lot of mistakes, including one of my own, I'll confess, where it wasn't necessarily clear where you answered or what was the question. So basically, I'm just going to tell you what the changes were. We numbered the question. Should we have to go back and say, oh, you missed one? But I think the thing that's most helpful is that previously the yes/no part was within the text. So we just moved that down a line and then we bolded it, just so someone could go sequentially and make sure that they're checking all the items off. If you go down to number 8, that was probably the biggest change. We changed originally there was some redundancy in that question, so we eliminated the redundancy. But there was also an opportunity to disagree. And if you were disagreeing, you were basically saying that you weren't going to be following the code. So we eliminated the opportunity to disagree. We had discussed not even making that a question, making it more like a credit card that when by signing this form. But some of the committee members thought that there should be an affirmative action to do that. And then the final change, if you keep scrolling, Niles, it's very minor, but when the code was updated last year, we did have a resident who we thought had a great addition to the code, domestic partners, just to bring us into the last year was 2021, but 2022. So we just updated the definition on the form. I don't know that any of these are substantive changes, and I don't know what kind of approval this form will need to go forward, but we hope the committee voted on this, and this is what we're recommending, that the council approved to go forward. And as I said, there's no real substantive changes other than what I've just described. Okay, any questions about?
Yeah, I want one quick question.
Sure.
Could this be what has to be filled in and signed, put on one page? Because when the way it's being done, you have to sign it, scan it in some way, and then email it back. So if it were done on one page, it would make the kind of the physical process easier.
Yeah, that's a good idea. However, that would be for the candidate form, because everyone has to come into the office to sign the oath of office form. So they're already here, because Niles has to notarize the form.
Okay.
Now I know that, and this doesn't necessarily involve the committee, but I know Niles had mentioned that there's a possibility that he may take an online notary course, which at that point we could, we could discuss doing it. To me, we could probably eliminate a lot of the preamble just to move it up, and maybe not even have the definitions. One of the things that we did identify was that the definitions no longer match the ethics code. But we figured that that would be a substantive change to have to go back and redefine everything. So, and I don't wanna say they don't match, they're just, worded differently, so, if that makes sense. But yeah, that would be a good idea, especially for the candidates form, because they do fill that out online. And that was one of the other things this review identified, was that, the form that was posted online and the form the candidates used was actually an outdated form. And we did go back and make sure that the council had approved the updated form, and the major difference was that what is now question 8, the affirmative action to update any disclosures. So, but that was approved, and we're working with Niles to get that all straightened out. So.
Any other questions from the council?
Any other questions? Okay.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah,
Laura.
okay, great. So I just have a couple of other things. We discussed and evaluated the ethics training that we did for the election committee. We thought the ethical dilemmas effectively encouraged participation to connect the real world ethical scenarios to the village code. We got some very positive feedback on them. And we also felt like going forward, having a relatively small group and being in an administrative setting were beneficial to the process. Finally, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon here and recognize Niles for his critical support and work behind the scenes. Most recently, on top of working with us on this whole review process, he assisted the committee in setting up a OneDrive account for document retention. So we'll be putting the training, the SOP, and anything we created this year in there for future committees. And as we've talked about before, we are in the process of, he has coordinated a confidential committee email account, which we'll be communicating more about in the coming weeks. So, and any additional information, our minutes are posted from our April meeting. So anyone who wants to see these forms that were posted, this information's in the minutes, and maybe it'll be part of the packet now since we posted it. And everyone is welcome to come to our next meeting, which is June 6th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
So that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lauren.
Ron, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. We need a motion to approve the updated conflicts of interest form under the Charter Section 903. The council needs to approve the form recommended by the committee.
Well, if you had not referenced the charter, I would have disagreed, but thankfully you. Is there a motion?
I so moved.
Well, I just wanna, cause
Okay.
just in terms of formality, I don't think I have it in front of me. I mean, we went through it, it's fine, but I haven't read it or any, I mean. Is this gonna be sent around or?
Yeah, you think
I think Lori.
I just emailed it to you,
I
but
think Lori
I
just
brought an
sent
extra
it.
copy just for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you, Jeff, do you need more time, and is this something, Ron, that can be held over to the next council meeting?
Well,
Sure.
Let me ask a question. Ron, have you reviewed it, like, has it gone through the whatever process that you have to go through that,
I watched the review on the screen tonight. I haven't independently gone through it.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if there's a rush, Lori. I mean,
There's no
it
rush.
looks, I think it looks great.
Yeah, there's
But
no
we
rush.
can take this up for the next council meeting and just vote on that.
Because
Okay.
presumptively, this will become enacted in the next,
Yeah.
for the next council session, so we can just do it in June.
Okay.
I have a question.
John?
Do other municipalities have a similar agreement set up for? This?
They're actually, if you like, it depends on which one you're talking about. If you go like to the village of Chevy Chase or the town of Chevy Chase, they have a much more detailed financial disclosure form that's required by their officials. So, and then some of the other jurisdictions do the state of Maryland form, which is very similar to our oath of office. So,
Okay,
does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
thank you.
great. All right, thank you, Lori. Appreciate it. And we move on to George.
Hi there, everybody. Election process. we had a very, very good election drop-off night. I think Andrew and Niles and I all wanted to extend our thanks to everyone who was down there. We wanted to extend some particular thanks for how lovely the weather was for an evening to be sitting out there for several hours. That was very good. We wound up with more than 60 people came by to drop off their ballots, which was excellent. We're very pleased with that. Niles can correct me if it's updated since then, but I think we're a little over 230 total. Now, as of yesterday afternoon, we're around 230.
Yeah, that have arrived.
That includes the.
That includes the 65 or whatever it was from Tuesday.
Okay, good.
Yes. Which I checked against our records from last year, and we're pretty close to about where we were last year. The totals are a little lower than last year, but we're on pace for, given the time period from when the ballots were first started being received. So I think that's going well, and the rate at which they are getting back to Electech, both in terms of how many days it's taking, which is from our last conversation with them, everything's getting back in a normal period of kind of 2 or 3 days, but also the number that are coming in from each update from Electech is pretty much in line with what we had last year. So that's, I think, a very good sign. For those of you who were not on the meeting on Monday, we wanted to extend our apologies about the issue relating to the postage paid envelopes and the QR codes replacing the ballot numbers that were on the envelopes last year. So we wanted to extend our apologies for that. That was not something that was in any of the proofs that we had worked with from the vendor. That was a surprise to all of us. If you have not mailed in your ballot yet, please remember it needs to put some postage on it. We have had the vast majority of the envelopes where people have reported to us that they mailed it without postage that have been delivered and been received by the vendor. They have those, but abundance of caution. If you have not mailed your envelope yet, please put postage on it. If you do not have a stamp, need a stamp, we have plenty at the village office. You can pick them up there, or committee members are happy to bring them by your house if that is something that you would need. The deadline for ballots to be received is the 23rd at 5 p.m. The other thing related to the 23rd, so from a scheduling perspective, currently we're scheduled that the election committee will meet in a public session with the vendors evening of the 23rd to review the ballot return envelopes, identify any that are non-conforming, and go through the curing process as it's laid out in the election plan from this year. And then we would have 24 hours and then would be counting the votes on the 25th. Both the 23rd and the 25th will be Zoom sessions. They are open to the public. If you would like to attend, you are absolutely more than welcome to attend. Each of the candidates will have the opportunity to name an observer who are allowed to raise objections. But if you see emails relating to the candidates and their observers, that does not mean they're the only people who are allowed to watch. Anyone who wants is allowed to watch. That's one of the benefits of doing it over Zoom. One potential change on that we would publicize on any of that, as of when Niles and I spoke with the vendor yesterday around 4 o'clock, all 230 something of the envelopes that have come in, they're checking them as they come in. All of them are currently conforming. We have nothing that would require a curing process at this time. If that is the case, the committee will discuss the option of just condensing down and just having the vote counting on the 25th, rather than having to meet on the 23rd to prepare to cure ballots, and there would be none. So there would be no need for a second session. So if that is the case, and we will know as of earlier on the 23rd, then that will be something that will be publicized, that we'll be canceling that session on the 23rd, and it will just be the vote counting session on the 25th. So I don't know if any of the council members have any questions about that, or about the ballots and the process that we have used up through now, as we've attempted to correct the issue related to the lack of postage.
Yeah, I have a question on reading this, on the curing process and on the, if an envelope comes in that is clearly written on a signature, say Mickey Mouse, is this something you'll take the next day or two to check out? Do you really mean to put down Mickey Mouse, or will you throw that out? It's hard for me to see the circumstance where you would spend the next day or two trying to figure out what happened. So do you have any conceivable scenarios in your mind of what kind of curing that would be?
Yeah, I think what that would be is that would be something that would be, I would imagine would be flagged by the vendors as names very much not in alignment with the control numbers associated with that envelope. And I think that would be something where we would have to have a conversation as a committee, where I do think that would roll into the curing process in terms of trying to identify what, if any, opportunities would exist in that case. The election plan says that the curing process doesn't apply to unsigned envelopes,
right.
But I don't think it doesn't say anything in there about missigned envelopes, and there's not signature verification, there's not checking, it's not like they look and say, oh, that doesn't look like George's signature.
Right.
But I think that would be maybe a question for Ron about whether or not the rules in that case would apply to do we cure if it is very obviously signed Mickey Mouse or a profanity across the back of it or something.
Right. So it's hard for me to think of, maybe my imagination isn't good enough, but I don't see the circumstances where you would then go out and check with the voters over the next day or two about what their intentions were and so on. So that's my question is, why have this process?
So we have it first off, it's laid out in the election plan that we'll do it. Second off, I think there's a few elements of non-conforming where the curing process could wind up triggering. So it doesn't apply in unsigned envelopes, and it doesn't apply to if individuals within the same household have used the wrong envelope, because that's established in the plan that those count. We don't need to mess with that.
Right.
The parts in the plan that are defined as non-conforming that we could get into it is if the outer envelopes are ripped, if they're not sealed, things like that, where there could be an opportunity could be made to attempt to verify that the contents have not been tampered with. Whether that is something that if it is unsealed and concerns about whether or not it was tampered with, that might not be something that the committee itself reviews, but rather the committee works to connect that voter to Electech, so they would have an opportunity to review and say, yes, that is who I voted for, allowing them to cure the fact that it is non-conforming and that it would be non-sealed without violating the sanctity of the privacy of the ballot. I don't think there's a lot of instances where potential curing could apply, but I think we wanted to make sure that we're covering all our bases, trying to hit all the contingents.
Okay, thank you.
I think we may have had a few council meetings on the subject in the past. And maybe through brain fog, a parent might have papers shuffled across a desk, and a kid is asking the parent, how do you spell Mickey Mouse? And accidentally that ends up on the back of a ballot envelope. So there are so many eventualities. That might be a vote for Arthur Alexander, that we want to make sure that that person's not disenfranchised.
I have a suggestion for the future, that if on the first night of doing this, the 23rd in this case, there are no non-conforming ballots, that you do the count that night rather than 2 nights later.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, George, but I think you also want to give a heads up, give folks enough time who think that the 23rd is just, a pro forma possibly, and that the 25th is the action date. So but I thought about the same thing, and maybe if there's, the problem is there's a 5 p.m. deadline, And then between the 5 p.m. and when you decide that there aren't any issues with the ballot envelopes and the ballots, might not be enough time to alert the residents who wanna witness the counting. So, at any rate, okay. Thank you, George.
I just had one
Yeah, go ahead.
question. This is more for clarification, and first I just want to start off, George, the entire team, you folks are amazing and awesome, so thanks, and I hope that whenever we do some scheduling of celebration of volunteers, that, you know, these accolades and you know, being effusive praise will be there as well.
And that won't go to Niles because he's not a volunteer. Sorry, Niles. Go ahead, Jeff, sorry.
So just real quick question. So, you know, I am by far any sort of technical expert on QR codes and all these other things, but just out of clarity, so it's the 23rd, and is there a simple way to have a report of, are there any ballots still in transit? And then the other question becomes, and maybe this is where it becomes really germane, and I don't think this is in the election plan, but I just put it out there, is, you know, let's say, I'm just making this up, let's say there are 5, right? So the real question becomes, first of all, within the election plan, does it even account for this? If not, then, you know, if they weren't there by the 23rd, well, that's it. And then, you know, maybe in a future year, you discuss it. And then the other question then becomes, when do they actually become of importance? So, for example, then if you do count the votes on the 25th, and there's no delta between the top vote getters of the outstanding ballots, 5, let's say, you know, whatever it is, then, you know, there isn't a real critical nature. Maybe when they come in, you could report them, but they wouldn't change the outcome of the election because the delta of those that haven't arrived would not be able to mathematically change the outcome. But what happens if you run a report and there's a certain delta 10 that are outstanding, and maybe there are only a few votes difference between, let's say, the 3rd and 4th.
Yeah.
Now, again, I just put this out there because if the election plan doesn't count for it, maybe it's just the 23rd and that's it, but I just want to put that out there.
And I would add to that question, what if those 10 are envelopes with no postage? And so they were sent on time and they somehow got caught in the system. We obviously didn't stipulate that scenario here in the plan. I think, and Ron and council members feel free to chime in, I think that's a game day decision and interpretation by the committee of the election plan. I think that's pretty cut and dry there, in my opinion. They would have to make that call. If between the 23rd, we realize there are ballots in transit, and perhaps they've arrived by the 25th, and these are ballots without postage, for example, or any other reason that they may have been delayed, I would say punt that to the election committee. But I don't know, Ron or
and let me just close my comment. I am not by far any technical master of election plans or QR codes or postage or anything. I just want to put it out there, and I do defer to the committee in terms of that decision because that is what they're empowered to do. But I just want to put it out there.
Well, I think this raises a question we've dealt with before. When is a deadline a deadline?
Right.
What does a deadline mean? And so that has to be, you know, part of the consideration.
And that discussion took place before the quote unquote stamp gate as a resident slash candidate called
so
it.
maybe the one caveat then, again, just putting this out there, and then I promise I'm turning back over, is you know, if there's the delta, if one can differentiate between those that didn't have stamps, right? So maybe there is that gray area of those that honestly didn't really fit into that bucket.
There's a presumption that made a difference. Suppose they are stamped. Should there? I mean, it's not clear one way or another that having a stamp or not having a stamp makes a difference in delivery time.
Right. So again, I think the committee has to decide and say, given that 9 or 10 unstamped envelopes arrived within the 2 to 3 day average that envelopes have been arriving in New Jersey, maybe this is just a non-issue.
Right, probably will be.
So.
On the note of the game day decision, I'm just curious, I mean, maybe this is a silly point, but like, this is so long ago, what did you do in the in-person election if, like, say, I forget what time the polls closed,
Yeah.
let's say it was 5 to 8,
Yeah.
and you're boxing everything up and a resident's running down the Brookville Road, maybe this never happened, I don't know, but it's running down, I haven't voted yet. What did the election
Well,
committee
I
do?
got stuck in traffic.
Yeah, no, at 8 o'clock, they shut it down.
Yeah, yeah, all right.
And you couldn't run upstairs with it.
You know, this,
So-
I think in this case, you don't play favorites. You know, if this is your
Right.
friend and neighbor who's running down
Right.
Brookville,
Right.
it doesn't matter. I think it's either it's done or it's not done. So I would agree that, you know, again, this has to be an election committee decision, but so, and Ron, I don't know if there's anything else to add there, but the council certainly shouldn't be chiming in since there are 3 incumbents running for election here.
And I just wondered how it
Yeah.
used to be.
No, that doesn't mean that we takes away our right to speak at the council meeting.
You can speak as much as you want, I'm just saying in terms of
Okay.
decision, I think the election committee should decide.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and technically, the council needs to approve the vote counting procedures, because the election rules do provide that the council does approve those.
Okay.
But, you know, I can certainly work with the election committee to address that issue if it comes up. I can say, and George and Niles might have better information than me, but you know, in addition to Niles' report about unstamped ballots still arriving, I believe he also put in place a process where folks who may have sent in their ballot without a stamp, and they know that, can have their ballot replaced, and they can be given a new ballot. And so you make sure it's received in that regard. So there are some safeguards in place already.
And that's maybe something in this weekly wrap-up, since we're running out of time here in terms of people getting stuff in the mail, is again, if you have any concern or questions as to whether or not you put a stamp on it, let us know, and we can track it, and then tell them, has not arrived, has arrived, do you want a replacement, etc.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's perfectly good.
No.
We've been getting daily reports.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The tracking is working.
Yeah, the tracking is working, we're hearing it, and just to go back to one of the questions that Jeff had posed originally, part of the tracking is saying it is in transit, so we've asked the vendor to keep an eye on where that is, just so that we have a sense of that number come next Thursday, next Friday, so that just on the case of, do we know where we're at, we know where we're at in advance.
So do we have to approve these procedures tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So related to the procedures and Andrew discussion that it would be a committee decision, the plan as it's written says the ballots must be received by the time on Monday. Ron, do we need like an official something from the council
We have to
delegating the ability to waive that to the committee? Because my understanding is the committee can't unilaterally make changes to the
Right.
plan because it was approved by the council back in January, February, or whenever it
I'm
was.
sensing from the discussion that we're not gonna change anything here tonight, but if people would want to change it, then someone would have to, I guess, offer a motion to change that and the ability of the election committee to make a game day decision, but is anyone?
Yeah, I would agree with George. I think we would be in a better position if the vote counting procedures were to reflect what should be done in the event a ballot arrives late without postage, and you want to make an exception for that. But however, you know, to repeat what I already said, you could also stick with the current deadline given the safeguards that have been put in place.
I think we kind of, in discussing this, unless I'm mistaken, I think we've decided that ballots that have not that did not have envelopes, that did not have stamps, have been arriving, and folks that are concerned have been reaching out, and still can reach out, we'll make that reminder. So I don't think we need to make any changes to the procedures unless someone would like to make a motion to give that power to the election committee.
Andrew, at the sake of someone throwing a tomato at me or a squishy ball, I know we have a relatively small number of folks online, but I'm just wondering if there's anyone, residents or anyone who'd want to comment at this time. I don't know, but you know, I wasn't
I
sure.
think our vocal residents online would have had their hands up already.
Okay.
There it goes.
Sounds good.
Marty.
Before we do that, I do just really quickly want to reiterate what Ron said, and we'll put it in the roundup tomorrow. If you or any of your neighbors or anyone you talk to is concerned that you mailed it without a stamp, please reach out to the committee, reach out to Niles. We can, first step, easiest step is we can check the tracking and see whether or not it's arrived or not. We can figure out if it's still in transit or whether or not it's going to be fastest, easiest just to get you an overnight ballot, or sorry, potentially overnight you a ballot or mail you a replacement ballot, cancel out the old one, and make it so that people can vote again. So if anyone, or you speak to anyone, has any concerns on that front, please, please, please reach out to us. We have options available that we can work to ameliorate any of those concerns.
And I would ask Niles in the roundup to make that the top top line.
All right.
And in bold.
Yep.
With
20-point font.
20-point font highlighted,
Yeah.
just so folks, so it draws
Yeah.
attention. Okay.
Sounds good.
Marty, and then we're moving on to financial matters.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate the ability to speak on this topic. First question is procedural. I believe that the regs, don't have them in front of me, but maybe you can check, George or not, said that the last date to get a replacement ballot was May 10th. So I'm not sure that people actually could ask for a replacement ballot at this point. So that's my first question. If you can answer that, then I'll come back for my second one.
Yeah.
Didn't we have a May 10th
I
deadline?
believe, yes, I believe that's the case. I think the question here is in terms of this postage question. You know, if the plan did not necessarily anticipate that. So I think if that's the question, that might be something to consider. But let me just pull it up.
Because I would want the committee to be authorized to issue replacement ballots.
Yeah. I think that's
this coming week.
That's a good
You know, as
point.
needed.
If we think it's a 2 to 3 day process, perhaps, and Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps we can have a vote here to authorize the committee to extend that May 10th deadline to, say, May 19th. Well, how quickly do these come?
We can overnight things if we need to.
Okay,
So
that's, so I would say the 18th probably, because then if it comes here on the 19th, you have 4 days. You send it in right away, that gives you a little bit of a buffer. If vote, and Ron, would that be the best approach here?
Yes, yeah, and Marty makes a good point.
yeah.
So the rules do say if the voter has lost or damaged his or her ballot, they can request by 8 p.m. on the 10th. So
we can track it.
this
right?
isn't lost or damaged, but I think it still should be clarified on the record that
Yeah.
we have a different deadline for the ballots without.
So in residents that have concerns, the process includes, we can track it, and
Yeah.
if it's nowhere to be found, I
Yeah.
guess that would trigger the ability to ask for a replacement. So do we have a motion to extend the May 10th deadline, should we say May 18th,
Good,
for a replacement?
okay.
Is there a motion?
Yeah,
Susan,
I'll
do we have a
second.
second? Arthur,
Yeah.
all in favor say aye. Aye,
Aye.
unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you, Marty. Anything else?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that detail being taken care of. Elections, it's all in the details. And again, I commend both Niles and the committee for really getting down the weeds here to make sure that this does go smoothly from here on out and to fix the glitches so far, which I think they did a good job on. My other question goes to sort of more basic principles, which is, the purpose of our election procedures is to make sure that all voters, all qualified voters can freely exercise their right to vote. And that tends to lean toward being more flexible. The discussion that the council just had, I thought was very productive about, some ballots still in transit, even 2 or 3, let alone 5 or 10, can make a difference. I don't know if this will be a close election, but a lot of ours are close elections. And so I thought the idea of giving the committee the authority tonight to make a game night decision as to whether they want to extend that May 23rd deadline by even a couple of days if we know there are ballots in transit. It seems to me that it's for the greater good and in the public interest to count all ballots that are en route. And again, a deadline is a deadline. Arthur, I take your point. But this is an unusual election because of those delayed ballots. And I mean, it's great so far. The post office has been delivering the ballots and have no postage. That's excellent. And I think that we just should, it would be helpful, I think, to give the committee the authority and the flexibility tonight, just in case it's needed. I hope it won't be. But again, I think it's just prudent to go ahead and give them the authority to make that decision to, you know, move back the received by deadline by 2 days, 3 days, whatever, to let those ballots that are still lost in the wilds of the Postal Service to arrive. Because counting votes is better than not counting votes. I mean, that's the bottom line.
All right, thank you,
I would
Marty.
ask the committee the council to consider that again.
Thank you, Marty. So while I agreed on your first point, and that was super helpful, and I think that we all agreed here, I think we, in our previous discussion on should we accept ballot envelopes without postage versus those with, if they're delayed, I think we just kind of came to a conclusion that what's late, what's not arriving on time is just not going to be accepted, and there haven't been any delayed ballots. You mentioned delayed ballots. There haven't been any so far, and we've offered quite a bit of time between when ballots were received here in our mailboxes and the deadline. So I don't think we need to do it. I'm happy for others to chime in, but I just don't, I think we want to just kind of be no gray areas here, because people are going to be upset if they then, because there's a ballot that wasn't mailed on time, arrived and they lost by that one vote and or won by that one vote. Others will be, it just adds to the drama that I don't think is required. If you're late on election day for a national election, federal election, you're late. Your vote, you missed your opportunity. So
actually, some states allow up to 10 days after the due date to accept late ballots because of postal problems.
Yeah, but after the 10 days, that's not 11 days or 12 or 13. This is the question of when do you draw the line? When is the deadline?
I was thinking 2 or 3 days. But, again, I think the issue here is whether or not the committee has the flexibility to actually make that game day call. And I guess I would like to see them have that on the premise that better to count votes than not count them, if you can, reasonably. And within 2 or 3 days seems reasonable to me.
Okay. I think between the amount of time folks have had to send them in, the tracking if there are concerns, and our previous discussion, I will not propose this or ask for someone to motion to propose it, but I'm happy to defer to Jeff, Katie, Susan, or Arthur to propose that.
I'm going to put one thing out. I'm not going to make a motion, but what I would like to just confer. So Niles, it sounds like you and the committee are on top of this tracking piece, and right now there is nothing that is causing alarm. Everything looks on track. So again, first of all, as an incumbent who's running, I am deferring, but let's say some anomaly comes up. I'm just putting it out there. Let's say something comes up that is just completely out of character, that there are a number of ballots that are tracked, that have been sent, but for whatever reason are out there, and they could really turn the election. The only thing I put out there is I'm going to defer between Niles alerting the committee, and then the committee perhaps go directly to the non-incumbent council members or Ron, just alerting them that there is an anomaly and that they would have discretion, perhaps if needed, to consider something. Right now, I'm not going to make a motion because it just seems that is overreach. But if the data tells you that there is a significant anomaly that appears, then it seems like we have in place the process, reporting, and wherewithal to make a decision, perhaps to consider it, but we don't have to do that now. That is something that would be up to Niles, the committee, and then perhaps Ron consulting with the non-incumbents like I said, this is like so far out of perhaps a possibility. There, I just put it out there is what happens if the data shows that there is an anomaly, at least there is a mechanism to address it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if the tracking says it was thrown in the mailbox here in Chevy Chase, and it's day 5, and it still hasn't been arrived. It's still sitting at a post office in
Right.
Cleveland instead of a post office in New Brunswick or
I
whatever.
can check exactly how it says, but my understanding is that it has a scan in where it says it has been scanned in the mail. It says it's in transit, it says it's out for delivery, and it says it's delivery.
Yeah.
Okay? So those are the stages that I know, because that's what I've been saying.
And let me be very clear, I'm not saying that, it shows that there is a ballot or two that's still out there.
Yeah.
It's, is there a significant anomaly? Like there is 30 ballots that for some reason are held up, which really could make a material difference. Not a
Right.
1 or 2 that is part of the delta of any year in any election. So anyway, I turn over, I'm done.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And just a motion on the procedures.
We have
Ah,
to
okay.
approve the procedure.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion to approve the
I will move to
election
approve
committee?
the procedures as we have received them and discussed.
Okay, Arthur moves. Is there a second? Katie seconds. All in favor, say aye.
One second.
Oh,
yeah.
I had suggested a couple edits.
Oh yeah,
what do you
no,
think, Miles?
yeah, sorry, yes. There's the main edits, I apologize.
oh, do we backtrack on an I? How do we do
Yeah.
that?
I don't think I called it yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's,
It's EI, if we
Yeah.
have to backtrack.
yeah,
So I can explain it real quick. So
Okay.
it's not changing anything of substance. With the 2022 election rules, the council clarified that any qualified voter can log in and watch the count. So I had just suggested adding a sentence from the 2022 rules to the 2022 voting counting procedures reflecting that. Because we didn't have that sentence in the
yeah.
2021.
It says, it says where, who can attend, attendees
Right.
will include the committee, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Ron had added any voter, I have the language and
Oh,
I can
good,
insert it,
good,
but
good.
it's just a line that was already in the plan that just says anybody can attend,
Good,
basically.
because George mentioned that.
Yes, he
It
mentioned
wasn't in
that,
the-
but
it
it's,
wasn't
but
written.
it was, we'll make that, change and I'll make
Good,
sure that's
okay,
good.
great.
Okay?
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
else?
and that's made in 2 places.
Yeah.
Right.
I do apologize, one last question, if anyone, and if not, I can follow up after the meeting, if this isn't one of those things at the tip of, someone's tongue. In terms of, write-in candidates, could someone refresh my memory in terms of, we talked about the identification of signatures,
Yeah.
but what about the idea of write-in candidates? Could you remind me in the election policy, what the exact, way of counting a write-in, does it have to be one standard name? Could it have different variations? But just so that there's clarity going into this vote count.
So, what I can tell you is that what I understand is that it's about identifying, the person's name in relationship to, are they a registered voter in the village?
Okay.
So most of the time, it's like looking at the voter roll and saying, yes, this person is this person. There's been a couple of instances where people have, in the past couple of years, where people have written in using like someone's maiden name, right?
Okay.
And because that person could be identified as a resident, they get qualified as a write-in because they're a resident. But that's the main.
So Robert, Rob, Bob, or Bobby
Right.
Miller it's still recognized
Or
as.
Mickey, Mick, or M.
Right.
Mouse.
That,
is-
and they have been nominated. They have been written in. Mickey,
Every election.
Mickey
Yeah.
has been written in.
Yeah.
And Minnie,
And-
just to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect, thanks folks,
Yeah.
for humoring me.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, let's just, we'll move on, we can go,
so just
oh, we need
repeating
a,
it.
so this was not related to to us approving your question, Jeff, was not related to the procedures. So
Yeah.
let's just for the fun of it, go through this again.
Yeah.
Would someone like to make a motion to?
I will move to amend, to adopt the election procedures as amended by our council Ron Bolt.
Yes.
Okay.
My second.
Second Katie, so Arthur moves, Katie seconds, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous,
Okay.
so ordered. Okay,
Aye.
financial money,
Okay.
money matters.
Money. Okay, this is the time where we adopt the budget and the resolutions for the property tax. I think John Sherrill here has been the first time somebody has raised the question about the personal income tax, the personal property tax. Because it's really a very minor part. All of the property taxes, and there are three of them, the assessed value of the property, the personal property, which is business tax, and the utilities. Utilities pay a tax for the privilege of running their lines and pipes and so on through the village on village right of way. All of those three different taxes add up to under 5% of our total revenues. So the reason we haven't paid much attention to it in the past is that it's pretty small beans.
Except that it sounds like it's only 3 residents here
That's right.
that are subjected, so it's not small beans to them.
To them, right.
Yeah.
So we really haven't paid that much attention to it in the past for that reason. But I want to thank John for bringing it up and forcing us to focus on it. Now, as I said, this is the third time that the tax proposals and the budget has been up for review. Residents have had 2 months to look it over. And it's time now to decide whether we are going to adopt the budget as presented or not. We've had some minor amount of discussion on a few items, nothing major as far as I know. And so it's now up to the council on whether to adopt the budget and to adopt the tax resolutions.
I would like to ask for confirmation / clarification
Okay,
of the
right.
expenditures. These new items, the proposed sidewalk snow
Right,
shoveling and
yes.
the Chevy Chase at home
Yeah.
scholarships or donations, they are merely proposed at this point. They would
Until
require a lot of council scrutiny and review and discussion, apparently spirited discussion.
Well, when
Right.
adopted in the budget, it's in the budget,
It's in
ready
the
to be.
budget,
Right.
but it's not necessarily an official program.
Um,
So are you, because if that's the assumption that they will go forward, if the budget is adopted, then I think I'd like to make an amendment. Raise an amendment.
Okay, yeah, what
To, approve it without those expenditures. Because I think this is the
Well,
sort
we've
of
had
thing
2 months to
people-
discuss it.
Yeah, I know, and I've heard a lot of opposition. I personally expressed opposition. And I think that it's the sort of thing that would require more transparency. People have been telling us they want more transparency in installing or instituting new programs. I've heard a lot of opposition to both of these, and a lot of support
Right.
also, but I think it
Well,
might be
the only
the sort of
opposition
thing-
that I've heard from one resident specifically, and that's it.
I've heard a lot.
Okay, well,
Lots
it
of-
hasn't gotten
lots of
through.
opposition. And it seems like this might be the sort of thing that's appropriate to put in the survey, assuming. we'll
Well,
only do
here's
one
the thing,
survey at a
this
time.
is why we have 2 months of review.
Right.
To allow discussion by residents and the council.
But-
And we have not had any of that in the 2 months. This wasn't discussed at either of the earlier.
I don't think in our council meetings, though, there was a conclusive support or opposition for any of those 2 items.
Well, they should have been raised at that, that's what the 2 months review is for.
Right, but the
is
final
to do
vote on the
that.
budget is part of that process, so it could be, I mean, this discussion is.
And in the past, we have included money in the budget for programs should they be instituted, and then they
Right.
weren't, so the money wasn't spent. So
Right,
my
yeah,
assumption
yeah.
was, just because it's there, doesn't mean we have to spend it.
Well, that's
If we
true,
don't have a
that's true.
program that enacts it,
That's
then
true.
we're not spending it.
But if we are to introduce a budget, and then we would then work on the administrative procedures for implementing it.
So let me say this, on these points, I was gonna raise a similar concern, and that is, while I'm in favor of one, I'm not in favor of the other. So I was gonna be expressing my support for the residential support in the snow removal efforts that were proposed and are supported by folks. But I still have not, kind of come around on the aging in place, funds, because again, I feel like there are a lot of other, worthy, organizations or worthy efforts to support residents that might not, take advantage of this or might find that it's not needed, so.
Well, I you know, whatever you vote, but I would have said that in the 2 months of budget review, that these points should have been raised, should have been discussed. Points should be argued through, what the objections would be raised in detail and discussed.
But I thought we did
And we
in our council
did, and
meetings.
I would have thought that if we were actually making a decision on
Yeah.
those proposals, we would have discussed them at the last meeting also.
Yeah,
And
right,
we
that's why I
didn't
was
really.
waiting, that's why I
We-
was
we
waiting
didn't,
for.
and
Well, but there
so-
was no conclusion to insert it
Yeah.
after no, there was no, unanimous or majority support. So the insertion of them, comes without that final, you know, without that being raised again at the, I mean, to me, it was basically because we had not decided on it, that these two items would not have been in here, because there was no conclusive support
Well,
for.
I'm in support of those items.
Yeah.
I support it.
Okay.
Well, we could, I think there's a couple things. First, we can take a vote, as Arthur said. I mean, we can all agree to disagree whether there is enough debate or what have you. But I also want to be very clear. I appreciate there are some who support residents, there are others who have questioned. My understanding is both are pilot programs, and that there is a process that will work with Niles and even Ron around certain criteria and things. So I think there is a staging process of what the administrative procedures are. So that's one. So that's why I feel, you know, that we're in a good place, because it's a pilot. It's not, as Lori has mentioned in the past, that we're creating some perpetual program. It's to trial it, but also we're gonna have very stringent criteria. The other piece, which is a little unrelated, but it's a follow-up question, because we could do a vote, is in the reserves, you know, we've designated walkability, designated street, designated capital projects, and I'm getting to why. There's no official earmark for those, right? And the reason why I'm asking is ultimately, if we needed discretionary funds for something, there is something that we could take from, but it would require a council vote to discuss it. So there is an escape hatch in case of any sort of alternative or emergencies or something. These are not earmarked reserves, these are things that we could.
Well, even more than the reserves, we have surpluses, we have money in the bank. So that, you know, the reserves, there's two kinds of reserves. One is kind of an emergency reserve, a rainy day fund in case something happens, we lose all our funds. The others are dedicated for capital expenditures. But then we just simply have, what's the latest, we have like $1 million, $1.5 million in the bank. No, where is it? Investment emergency. Current assets less reserves are $1.5 million of undesignated money. So,
The last point, and I'll go out on a limb, again, we can take a vote on this, but it is one last question I direct towards Ron, and maybe there are others around the table who know the answer to this, but let's say we approve these pilot programs. Is there a contingency or so as a council that unless we feel comfortable with the criteria and the implementation, we don't approve the idea that there'll be an outlay?
right, this is,
Right?
exactly, this is an appropriation, not an expenditure.
So just clarifying, and I know there is not a huge number of people on the line, but we do have the people on the line who are very vocal in their beliefs, is the idea that if there is a vote, and there is a vote to go forward with these line items, this is an appropriation, but in no way means that we will make any outlays, because I can be very frank with everyone around this table. I also do not feel comfortable with the idea of approving funds without having the very specifics of how they would be outlaid.
Right.
But I feel comfortable with the idea of a pilot program around things that residents have been very vocal about on the surveys and other things that have gone out, and saying, yes, we will make an appropriation for pilot programs, but there will be no outlays until the council votes again, in this case, the new council, that they feel comfortable with the procedures.
Good.
Is that
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, that certainly works. I think, well, I was just trying to debate whether the line item should reflect pilot program, or if there should be a separate motion whereby the council states that it will discuss the
Contingent
parameters
on.
of the program at a later date, just so there's no argument later as to, well, the money's been appropriated and that's an approval.
So like
Because the money's
contingent
been
on
appropriated.
council approval
Well,
of administrative
Ron,
procedures.
Let me look at one other thing in the charter. I want
Yeah,
to
it
see.
says, no money may be spent without having been, and I can't remember what the word is here, appropriated in a budget, approved in a budget, or something of that sort.
Or, and the charter does say in section 701 that the council approves contracts. So, before a contract was signed, that would be another opportunity for the council to decide whether they wanted to spend the money that's been appropriated.
Is that the
And we can
council
look
or
at one
the
other
chair
thing.
Is it-
for a contract? If it's under 10
If it's
grand,
under $10,000,
okay, got it.
it's just the
Yeah.
the approval. It's over $10,000
Right.
that it needs council
Right,
approval.
right. Um,
So in this case, aging in place is under 10,
Yes,
and the snow removal is over 10.
yes.
But we can still make it contingent on, we could have that special contingency that no outlays would occur unless council approves of spending plan or something like that.
Yeah, and I think you can just put an asterisk next to that line item and have a footnote that the money's being appropriated, but it's subject to further council vote on expenditure.
Council expenditures and approval of procedures. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Right. I'm not sure if that makes anyone, who was in opposition more comfortable, but that certainly makes me
Good.
comfortable, so, selfishly.
Okay, well, let me then move to introduce the budget as amended by Ron, to say that these are asterisk item, aging in place and snow removal residential, to be further approved by future council, and acceptance of procedures.
Arthur, you're gonna hit me.
Go ahead.
And I apologize for this, but I do wanna just mention, I know it's mentioned elsewhere, this is
Yeah.
not contingent on approval, but the ARP funds, recognizing that this is a significant amount, I know next year is about 500,000 and then another 400, is again, this is not contingent on approval tonight, but just the idea that we have it somewhere, just
Yeah.
so that it's just there. And again,
We
this
can-
is, could be
Right.
just
We can just-
administratively,
Yeah.
just put it there
We can
somewhere.
add it, so
Yeah, yeah.
under the, as we have it in our database.
Yep.
It's line item, which is not in here, but we can add it to what is, published. It's item 40001
Okay.
federal grants.
Okay.
And that's where we put this year's transit of the,
In the accounts.
in the accounts. So what we could do is have that as a.
That would be marvelous, because again, we're not talking about a few thousand, this is a
Right.
significant amount of
Yeah,
money.
no,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for bearing with me.
Yeah.
I have a question for Ron on this. That ARP money that comes in, I have not included under our revenues because it is outside of our normal stream of revenues. And I'm not sure how we deal with that in the budgeting process.
Well, yeah, I think that's correct. It's not revenue. It's not tax revenue, in other words. It's a grant. And so, I think it would be sufficient. I think Niles had a plan already, correct me if I'm wrong, Niles, but just, you're gonna keep it,
Yeah.
you're not gonna commingle it, you're gonna keep it separately itemized as
Yes.
as grant monies.
Correct.
So,
Because it's not subject to the same spending restrictions like revenue is.
Right.
good, okay, okay.
All right, let me just call on Tiffany, who had her hand raised, and put some comments in the chat. I don't know if it's authorizing or legislating on an appropriations bill that you're referring to, but go ahead, Tiffany.
Right, so you're authorizing a new program, pilot or not, and you're authorizing on an appropriations bill. We don't have a separate budget and appropriations process in Martin's Additions.
Right.
So, again, if I'm a resident who reads what was the cover note for this budget, it doesn't say anything about a pilot. It says we are proposing these new programs. And again, I would say, you know, in the past, when new programs have been discussed, this annual survey has given the pointed questions have given resident feedback that's then determined whether or not, or helps the council determine whether or not to budget and appropriate funds. So general questions about, you know, do you support snow shoveling is not the same as, you know, here's a proposed program with the criteria. Would you support village municipal funds being spent on this? Similarly with the donation, you know, the proposed for a donation to Chevy Chase
Tiffany,
and
they're
Hall.
not donations, it's not a donation or a contribution. It is
Okay.
provision of
So,
services
again,
to individuals.
There are no specifics written about that as a standalone program
No,
anywhere
that's
for
a different
residents
issue.
to read. And so then be able to provide you guys feedback. So I know, you know, that you're trying to make it flexible for next year's council, Next year's council could add these things to the budget if they got the feedback that supported it and next year's council determined that it was appropriate to go forward with the programs. But when you put them as line items in the budget, that signifies to the general public that these things are going forward. And so again, you know, I think the appointment that you, Mr. Chairman, raised and that Susan raised, you know, these haven't gone through. There wasn't a white paper that said, here's a new program for snow shoveling. There wasn't a separate white paper that was circulated to residents that said, here's a new proposed program for us to give money to Chevy Chase at Home.
No, it's not to give
Those
money
were not
at Chevy
sent
Chase at
around as
Home.
standalone
It's giving
items.
money to individuals to support their membership at Chevy Chase at Home. Well, I just want to make that clear.
So again,
It's not a
there's no piece
donation
of
or a
paper,
contribution.
Arthur,
Well,
there's no white paper
that's
that
true,
has
yeah,
been
I agree with
circulated
that,
to
I'm just
residents.
clarifying your language, that's all, Tiffany. I
Yeah,
agree,
again-
I agree with everything else you said.
Okay, so again, that information hasn't been given to residents in a way that here's something new we're proposing to do, and here's how it's gonna work. If you guys have talked about welcoming that feedback, again, I will point to past surveys that have informed whether or not village funds have been spent on programs. And again, it was after very pointed questions were given to residents, and that feedback was helpful. So I encourage you guys, you know, if it's something you're interested in or the next council is interested in, can easily put these questions into the survey and get feedback that can then, you know, flow into the decision-making process. But right now, there are 11 participants on this call, plus you guys. How many village residents are actually aware that we're talking about giving money to Chevy Chase and Home?
Oh! You're giving money to individuals.
Ultimately, it ends up there.
So, Arthur, let me put something on the
So thank you,
table.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
And again, we can take a vote. I do believe, and again, that there's been a very deliberate, thoughtful process. I think that there was a separate public safety survey that identified aging in place, and I know there's discussion there. Also, I think at
And snow shoveling came up.
and snow shoveling, I think that these are topics that ad nauseum, in public, open discussions, have been things that residents have expressed. Now, again, this is a vote, but the idea that nothing will be spent until there's approval of procedures, and that residents, maybe there's a form or something, but discussion of what those procedures would be, that for me at least makes me feel comfortable. And I think just the other piece on this, which I want to clarify, which maybe didn't make it in the wording, to Arthur's credit, I have heard, and we could check the open meetings record, but Arthur has said pilot ad nauseum.
Right.
And maybe what Ron had suggested is we could put pilot, you know, or something like that, but whatever that might be. But I think that there has been really thoughtful discussion and feedback to the point where at least we could take a vote. If it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through, and then if it needs to, a new council, it needs a new council.
If I might just clarify,
Yeah, please do.
you made a reference to the Public Safety Task Force survey. The question was actually framed as, do you support the village or another group? Or words to that effect. It wasn't as if people were saying, we want our village paying for these services. I think we all want our elderly or otherwise desirably, appropriate residents to receive the services that you're suggesting. We want them to be well. We all like our residents. If we're sort of suddenly cast as un-American for not, or un-VMA for not supporting this program, I think that it's been very unclear to people until the last couple of months that this was actually something on the table. And a lot of people have told me, if we do this here, are we gonna support, you know, everything that comes along? Where do you draw the line? And yes, you call it a contract, but that doesn't prevent
Well,
another
in fact,
from
if
getting a
people can
contract.
make a good argument for doing other things,
Well, I mean.
I think there's no reason not to do
And
it if we
it's
have the money.
presented, if it's presented to the residents.
Yeah.
Not
okay.
just a sort of,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I don't
Five-person
think, the
decision.
argument that this is a slippery slope to something, I don't think holds water. If there are good arguments for doing things, then we have the money, and then we could do it. The fact that we have not done it in the past is not an argument not to do it in the future.
So the question goes to what Tiffany said, and then I'm happy to call on
Okay.
Suzanne, who has her hand raised, but the question then is it enough
Do we want to get more
notice to
computer-
residents?
Do we want to get more feedback?
Exactly, and
Okay.
is feedback solicited via, Tiffany used the term white papers, something that's formal, or in meetings that are sparsely attended? So that's the other question, but Suzanne, please.
I just asked her to unmute, so we'll take a sec.
Hey there, hi everyone. I'm Suzanne Wright. I live at 3520 Bradley Lane. Moved back to the neighborhood a few years ago. My parents, long-term residents, and I really appreciate being able to participate in tonight's meeting and to listen to the very thorough and deliberate process of the committee. I try to follow the emails that come out and everything, and just as a interested resident of the community, I'm a little confused about the programs that are being suggested, and so I just wanted to share that I do follow, but I it's not something that has been clear to me. And in looking at the documentation, I'm just not understanding the what the village has to do in terms of appropriating the money versus approving of a specific program within the money that is appropriated. So thank you for hearing my questions.
Thank you, Suzanne, that's helpful. I mean, it's anecdotal evidence here that maybe there needs to be a greater outreach effort for us to proceed with these. I mean, I think it's great to help residents, whether it's with snow or those that can't afford, the ability to engage more and get help from local NGOs or organizations. But to make that happen, there are a couple of steps beyond just having a discussion about inserting it in the budget, I think, is my conclusion from the feedback and this conversation. So the question is, I guess there are a couple of questions. Well, first of all, please comment.
Yes, okay, I'll comment. You've all made very good arguments. And I'm willing to defer these. Katie, you had something to say too.
Oh, no, go ahead.
But I think having raised this, starting a discussion, and we should include this in our survey and have further discussions on it. I do want to clarify that this is the village code prohibits, and I voted for it, that we do not contribute or make donations to organizations. That what is being proposed is neither of those. It's not a contribution, it's not a donation. It would be provision of providing funds to individuals in the community to become a member of an organization. So it's not a contribution or a donation to an organization for some kind of it's not like giving to the Red Cross and hoping, that somehow their work is useful to Martin's Addition. This would be specific services for specific people. And the snow shoveling is the same thing. It's specific services for specific people, and both of those fall into that kind of category. But I think I will go along and say perhaps we should be getting more feedback, more survey information from the community.
And just a technical question in terms of budgeting. This is for this fiscal year.
Yeah.
If in the meantime, a new council has put out a survey and receives feedback that says snow shoveling per request on residential sidewalks, yes, by 90% or whatever it is, whatever the triggering point is for us to support it, that could be inserted into the budget for the same fiscal year as we're approaching winter 2022-23.
And Susan will remind us that some of us thought that composting was a great idea for everybody, and the surveys turned out that says, no, don't spend my money for those people's right, for those people's compost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to just put one thing out, and this is kind of in hindsight, but I do believe this is why many municipalities have a standalone budget forum that is a public forum that isn't just in a council meeting, because I believe there are many residents who have been part of this process who are very much for these programs who aren't here tonight because they have been out, as Arthur has said, for well over 30 days now and discussion, and I think they're going to be upset that they're not possibly going to be included, and there's going to have to be some real, I think, discussion about why they weren't, because I think there has been a very thoughtful discussion up until now. So
maybe there needs to be a direct correlation between, I think it's a good idea actually, a direct correlation of the surveys, the outcome of the surveys, and having a forum based on that for the council to make decisions. Wow, there seems to be great interest in this. Maybe we'll propose this for our budget, etc. I think that's a good idea as well.
I agree. Now, I do want to just say, Arthur, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I mean, I have great respect for you. Truly, you are an oracle of knowledge. You are not someone, I think we would all agree, at least, I will say, you are not someone who's flippant. You are not someone who, in any way, shape, or form, proposes anything around fiscal activity that isn't well thought out. And so, just by default of Arthur for these past couple months being a champion of this and carefully discussing it, in many ways gave me full confidence and understanding, because Arthur wasn't just proposing these things out of thin air. I mean, he proposed these things because there were a number of residents and a lot of data points suggesting that these are two things that are
discussions
important.
with Chevy Chase at home and the county administrator of these programs.
So I just want to point out, I mean, Arthur, when Arthur proposed this, I have to say my eyebrows raised, because I was like, that's wonderful, because, you know, Arthur is a very, very, I think, conservative person when it comes to budgets. But he put it out there, we've had plenty of time to digest it. That's why I feel so comfortable, but.
Katie?
Yeah. No, and I think that we have had time to digest it, but, you know, I think we can all agree, we all have a lot going on right now, and maybe we should kind of open it up for a forum. But I am supportive of your expenditures. I will say, on that note, I mean, Mr. John Sparrow's visit earlier, that's really got me thinking about the personal property tax and how I feel about considering zeroing that tax. So maybe we kind of explain that too, even though we talked about it's really maybe impacting 3 residents.
Yeah.
It's significant.
Well,
yeah.
it could impact more
Right,
with
that we
COVID,
don't know.
with more businesses
Sure.
moving home, or I don't know what the triggering point there is either.
Yeah.
If you're incorporated or have an LLC out of your home, maybe that's the triggering point. I have no
Yeah.
idea.
A lot of
And
businesses
you
change
have to
that.
have declared in your business declaration a certain
That you have a
property.
home office or
That
something
you
like
have
that.
a property.
Yeah. So would we wanna then, motion to approve this budget with the amendment of removing those 2 line items?
For the moment,
For the
yes.
moment,
Okay, I'll accept that.
5349 and 5520?
Yeah.
No, not
Oh.
5520.
Sorry.
It's just it hasn't been assigned a number yet
No,
because
it's
it's new. Unlike, there used to be a program to do sidewalks, so it hasn't a number yet. So,
Well,
you can
there,
just say
well,
it's
I
in
there
call
are
it-
numbers
place.
here, no?
Yeah, 5349.
Right,
5349.
5349 is the snow removal
Yeah,
residential.
and the other
and
doesn't have a
5520.
number.
Yeah, it doesn't, the aging in place.
Oh,
doesn't have a number.
that's,
I'm
I
just
thought
saying,
that was
just
part of the,
remove- no,
okay.
yeah.
So, all right,
And before we have the motion, Mr. Chairman, this is a public hearing,
Yeah.
and I
Yes.
apologize if I missed it, but did you confirm whether there were any other public comments?
Yes.
I don't see any hands raised at this moment. Okay,
All right, and you said
So-
it's now closed.
so it's now closed, this part of the. Marty, this is not like a ballot envelope arriving a second late, right? 501.
Sorry, just hit slow to hit the button. My question was just a clarification.
Yeah.
I'm one of the residents who do support both of these proposals. And Arthur, I know that you gave it a lot of thought, and I agree with the proposal that Jeff raised about, let's spell it out with some, procedures here before it gets its final approval to expend the money. My question is just clarification. I'm a snow shoveler. I'm not clear whether you're talking about allocating potentially, possibly, $15,000 to shovel people's private sidewalks from the street to their front door, or whether we're talking about having the public sidewalks cleared, because I'm more concerned about the public. I mean, I think it's nice for people who need help shoveling their front walks. I think that's a nice thing to do for elderly residents or anybody who's got a disability. I mean, I was in a wheelchair. I needed help 2 years ago. And my neighbors chipped in and helped. It was wonderful. But the point is that the question here in my mind is just, what about the public sidewalks? I'm not talking about from somebody's street to the front door, but like a stretch of Taylor Street that is where a sidewalk is really icy for the 50 or 60 foot width of the property. And everybody gets forced out to the street. And so
Maybe that will have to
this
be
is
part
about
of the
private
process.
sidewalks or shoveling
Well,
public
Marcy, maybe this
sidewalks?
has to be part of the process when this line item, should this line item be approved
Yeah.
down the road, what that exactly means. So
Well,
we're not there-
contemplated was that for the public right-of-way. I'm not sure where we would stand legally on shoveling people's private sidewalks up to their front door. But this only contemplated the public sidewalks.
That's the true definition of slippery slope.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, that's what I needed to clarify, I
Okay.
appreciate it very much,
Thank you. Thanks, Marty. And with that, this part of the public hearing has come to an end, and we will ask for someone to motion that we approve this budget and tax rate resolution, but the budget in particular with the amendment of removing line item 5349 and non-line item aging in place.
For later consideration.
For later consideration. Would someone like to motion? Okay, do we have a, Susan moved? Arthur seconds, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have Katie, Susan, Arthur, Andrew saying aye. Nay?
Well, it puts me in a very uncomfortable spot because this is the budget that was sent out.
Yeah.
And
I agree with Jeff, whatever he's gonna say.
you know, and what it does is it puts me in a position of saying I'm not approving the budget, which isn't the case. What we're doing is we're now approving an amendment that is coming in.
Well, this is
Well,
approving the
I-
budget with this amendment.
Well, but
the-
it's sort of punting something down the road that we don't have a real gut understanding of what that punt is. And I just want to have some clarification on it, because right now it's putting me in this opposition of not voting on something which, there's something here which I did approve on, but last minute now we're changing it. So, Ron, is there some procedural thing that, because I'm just a little confused of
Sure,
how we
well,
got
you
here.
could oppose the motion with an explanation, and your explanation could appear in the minutes if that would help.
Sure, whatever goes. I mean, I just want to say, I think that there has been enough debate and discussion where I feel very comfortable about the idea those line items should remain, but there would be no outlays until the council, in this case, most likely a new council, would host a public forum and go through what those procedures are. So it may be semantical, but I just feel there has been enough discussion, and I feel that if folks were notified that this was a possibility that these would be removed tonight, there would have been a number of people on this call who would have been here standing up to ensure they would remain.
At the same time, I think what we've also clarified here is that there may not have been that kind of visibility because this has not been brought to people's attention, or only people that are paying attention or reading the emails. If there had been a public forum post-survey, maybe this would have, people would have seen this or would have been opposed or in favor and had more visibility into this. I think this is a general issue here in the village with the usual suspects attending, joining, speaking out, which is great, and me wishing there'd be greater engagement. So you've made this point. Is this as in opposition or voting present with that explanation?
Well, I will throw out in plain speak that I support the approval of the budget, and the only thing that I'm also, as a caveat, is I would have liked to have seen these line items remain, but I am not going to get in the way of the budget not being approved.
So am I gaveling that as a unanimous?
Yeah.
I would like to say that I.
But that explanation could appear in the minutes.
Yes. And Katie's associating herself with those very same comments.
I do, I support.
And I associate myself with those
Yes,
comments as well.
Okay.
me too, yeah.
Fantastic. So a majority
A
associates itself and
With a,
to,
with a dissenting opinion.
Right.
Or concurring in part.
Yeah.
True teamwork.
okay. All right.
Just so that we have it clear, can we also have a motion on the
Tax rate,
Well,
yes.
the tax rate,
Would someone like to move?
I move to approve that.
Okay,
tax rate.
Susan is moving.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Arthur seconding. All in favor say aye.
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 And I think, Katie,
Unanimous.
your points for the future about reconsidering,
Yeah,
Personal
Per-
property.
personal
yeah.
property tax, yeah.
Niles, is there a way to know how many people pay the personal property tax?
Not to my knowledge.
Right,
I
that's
mean,
right.
what we could, I think we could have a little bit more investigation as to, what other municipalities do in terms of this tax. I know, like, every once in a while, the managers will ask, what's your rate here, or things like
Mhm.
that. And so we can have sort of a discussion of how do municipalities deal with this tax?
Right,
And
right.
that could be informed.
Yeah. At one
decision-making.
point, somebody in the county or the states told me, this was like 10 years ago, that there were 3 households paying this. But that was, that's old information, and that was, in fact, if it were 2, they couldn't tell me, but the fact that there were 3 made it legal to say that there were 3.
Yeah. No, yeah, so that sounds good. So I
Okay,
can
good.
ask that question.
Yeah.
Good,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, next, the manager's report.
Certainly. So we, a couple of different things. One, I submitted the report for the American Rescue Plan for April 30th. We haven't spent any of the American Rescue Plan funds, but we're still required to by this Treasury Department to file a report saying that we haven't spent anything, and so that has been completed. The walkability stuff, I'm gonna send the email that the council has reviewed about the improvements on village streets, on Monday. We got the final last edits, and so I'll send it out on Monday. The utilities work is continuing on Brookville Road. They've had supply issue delays, so it's sort of starting and stopping as they're doing it. I have, related to that work, we're working on trying improvements to Brookville Road. I'm gonna send the council an email tomorrow with a plan to submit to the state to improve the sidewalks on Brookville Road, widening them and so on, which has been a concern for a long time.
So that's the engineering report we got from the traffic group you're sending in?
Correct. So yeah, so we got from the traffic group a report on improvements to Brookville Road, so.
On the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And they know the guy who is going to.
Yeah, they have
approve it?
connections with SHA, so they're gonna help facilitate our conversation with State Highway. And I actually had a conversation on Tuesday night while we were doing the ballot collection with our state senator, who was doing his own canvassing in the community. And he said that, once we're ready to submit to the state, he will support that as well. So we had a good conversation there as well.
Good.
On that front as well. Alright?
Okay.
And I think those are the main things for tonight, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions? All right.
Can we then just go do it?
Yeah, yes. So in terms of, once we get the approval of the state, then we can, what they're gonna do is issue us the permit to make the improvements to.
Yeah.
To
And that,
Brookville Road.
I mean, it's just like a week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks?
It depends on the state, so we're gonna try to move it through as quickly as possible. We've put to them that WSSC is already doing work,
Right.
we're gonna try
Yeah,
to
we're
combine with
actually
that.
gonna do it.
So we're gonna try to get it over the next few months here, but that's the plan.
Good,
So we'll
good,
see what the
good,
state
good.
says. so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Resident comments for the final part of the night. And by the way, I was just gonna add quickly, I noticed that we had workers on those the parking lots and the
Yes.
potholes.
Yep.
But whatever they did there, they left so quickly that the tar or whatever they put in there, the cars came in and put them right back where they were, so
Well, they tried to set up sort of a barrier,
they
but I
did,
don't
but
think
it's, that stuff doesn't
Yeah.
cool off fast enough, so.
We'll keep an eye
Yeah.
out for that, but we'll talk to Mr. Shirazi
So
again.
maybe he was paying by the hour or
Yeah.
minute and wanted them in and out.
I have one quick question, and it's between Susan and Keith maybe. I think typically there is some sort of celebration, right, for volunteers. Is that
Yes,
typically
that's
in
right,
June?
in June.
Yeah.
So I know, so just the question, is that something we're considering, or is it gonna be now
Is that the
something we can?
recreation committee doing that, or?
Yeah.
The CEC.
Well, last year
last year-
the chair organized it, so I was gonna talk to you about that.
I only bring it up because we're
And-
obviously won't have another meeting.
Yeah.
No
with
pressure.
And you don't
I-
have any hesitation about in-person,
If it's outdoor, I think right now,
it's outdoors,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, we could, yeah, we did it at La
Yeah.
Ferme last year, but we could try to get their side veranda
yeah,
this
yeah.
year.
I'm happy to work with Keith in putting something together. I think most people feel comfortable now, to congregate in an outdoor setting for sure. If it's kind of go ahead.
I just remembered one other very different thing, so why don't you finish this
Yeah.
and then I'll.
So I'm happy to coordinate with Keith and the council for that matter in figuring out a good space and a good time to do that.
Yeah.
Jeff?
No, and I put this out there, this is tradition, precedent, I think it's wonderful, I hope it happens. I guess the only consideration, which I don't even believe is consideration, is was there any thought that you might think of something in July, that would be a celebration of not only past but future, so that way it might be a nice kind of, I don't know. But anyway, I just put it out there. I wasn't sure if you were hard set on June or if there's flexibility July. That isn't really up to me. It's up
Yeah.
to the.
My greatest
committee.
frustration with the 4th of July, or if that's the timing, is a lot of folks do travel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll miss that opportunity, but we'll figure this out and I'll coordinate with Niles.
So most likely June.
So this is the other the totally different topic, but our next door neighbors here, Chevy Chase Arts Academy, has proposed doing some changes to the security of the building, to add a buzzer to the door downstairs to ADP. This would be a buzzer that we could that would mainly be utilized after hours. So like during the workday, it would not be active so that residents could be here. But yeah, but like since they have lessons till 7:30, 8:30 sometimes, that they would like the ability to house it, and both us and them would have access to the buzzers. So I just wanted to ask, I meant to ask Ron this earlier, but is there any issues with them potentially proceeding with something like that?
Is like a camera?
No, what?
Yeah. They proposed.
No, I don't see any issues. I mean, how broad of a, well, the Maryland wiretap statute prohibits us from capturing conversations, but this would just be a video camera. The video camera case law generally provides that you just want to be careful that you're not creating a false sense of security. But you know, I'm picturing this is going to be more like a doorbell ring camera rather than a security camera. So I don't think we're going to have any issues.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll follow up with you with the details just so that we can be secure on that. But I just want to put that out for council consideration. And so on.
Okay, thank you,
All right.
Nels.
All right.
All right, we're gonna have one resident comment and then we're adjourning because it's the only hand I see. Is it Marty? Is that how you pronounce your first name?
You guys are so cute. What can I tell you? Andrew, you picked up one of the things on my short list here, which is that, yeah, the parking spaces along the side there, the patches need to be redone. They're actually a hazard, a tripping hazard at this point, because of how uneven they are. So whoever did that work, I guess that was done at the owner's expense, not ours, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the landlords. That's all the landlords.
The landlord, well,
right.
if you get back on the landlord,
Yeah.
Niles or Andrew, thank you for that. And the other question I had goes back to the budget. The $4,800 for Pepco, does that include like more streetlights, or what is that for? $4,800 in the line item for Pepco?
That is for our streetlights. It is the cost of the electricity for the streetlights.
Okay, Niles, that explains it. If we wanted to get new streetlights, to add more streetlights, that would be much more expensive than $4,800.
Yeah, roughly adding a street light costs around $1,800 each. So
$1,800 for the streetlight. Okay.
For a new
That was my
streetlight,
question.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, at 9:30.
9:30.
Keith, you have a question?
Yes, can I move to adjourn the meeting?
Would someone like to move to adjourn the meeting?
Yo.
Susan moves. Arthur seconds again. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Keep the umbrellas handy.
9:31, May 12th. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and good night.
Lori,
I'm gonna end the meeting for all.
your email today about the,
Oh, about the language on the stater terms?
yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
do you want to suggest that we have, that would, I think, involve,
Who said 8:30? That would be done.
I'm sorry.
that would
Famous last
involve
name.
a charter amendment
He
or
jinxed us.
and the charter says at least 3 minutes.
Okay, well,
And what you're suggesting is to say.
well, the charter
I'm sure you
refers
went
to
through
the
the
election.
arts
not
committee.
the others
No.
committee.
Oh, right.
Remember.
I
thought-
So it's not
I
a
know this
charter amendment. It's
Are you kidding?
the ordinance, and, you know, when we
Thank you.
made the recommendation,
Yeah.
we had said it would require a set number. But then Ron's language with the vacancy, I guess, would provide a loophole that you can go back and forth, between numbers, which kind of.
Sorry, I don't mean to
goes
run
with
behind you
the
there.
staggered terms. So, does that make sense?